Let's bring in somebody who is also an expert on issues of finance and budgeting, and this is Dr. Abraham Rugo. He's the country manager for International Budget Partnership, Kenya. Abraham, good morning.
Good morning, Eric. How are you?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for speaking to us again, and welcome to the Situation Room.
Thank you very much.
You've heard our introduction to the topic.
Yes, I did.
Of course, you have the full background, in fact, even the inner details of what's happening at the Senate and what's happened previously.
Yes.
From the get-go, what's your take on the standoff?
I think the truth of the matter is that the standoff, in my opinion, is a bit selfish. Because, first of all, this is a formula that was tabled, has been with the senators for the last 18 months or thereabout, from March last year. And secondly, they have not even told the public what is it that was tabled to them that they are debating and fighting over. We're just hearing numbers being flared up here and there. But the fundamental, I think, for me, is that a formula, and you have rightly said in your intro, does not solve development problems. Because where we were starting as counties, we were at very different levels. You cannot compare Lamu with Turkana. You cannot compare Elgeyo Marakwet, and I'll come to the details of that with Machakos and the like. So we were starting from different levels. The drafters of the Constitution were very careful to think of a mechanism in which we will balance things out. And you have rightly talked about the marginalization policy, so I will not go, the equalization fund, so I will not go so much into that. The problem we are trying to solve, which is what I feel the senators are not bringing out to the conversation, is that in a country like Kenya, we should be moving away from proxies of public need to actual direct measures of need. What do I mean? Population is a proxy. The assumption that when you have many people, then you are likely to have a higher disease burden. You are likely to have a higher infrastructural challenge. You are likely to have a higher educational demand. But that's not always the case, because you have areas where the population and the size of the land may be smaller, but the disease burden, for instance, around the lake region, the disease burden is so much higher than you will say in a place, say, for instance, like Mandera and Garissa, because of the different kind of challenge. And therefore, in a formula, you try to balance direct measures of need with what you will call actual costs of running government. For instance, whether a county has 20 people or has 50 people or has 100,000 people, each of them has a governor. Each of them has a county assembly. We can discuss as to the how good we were in making choices like those ones, and why how we could have distributed our counties. But that's a discussion for another day. So I think the senators have in front of them a formula that starts to move us to a direct measure of need. And why is that the case? Because the constitutional provision is that finance should follow functions. Now, functions are not an empty thing you do out there, but functions are basically a response to the needs of the public. So one of the critical functions of counties is health services. And health services then is supposed to follow the kind of disease burden that you have, the kind of demand. And that's what you see in this formula. And I say this because I've been involved in this discussion for quite a while, through the last two formulas depended a lot on proxies. Population 45%, land area 18%. And that's what now is being introduced with direct measures. So, for instance, we know the disease burden in this country, and that's why you see, for instance, health is receiving a fair allocation. So for me, I think that's the discussion that we should be having. Are our finances following the function every county should be providing? And a function, as I have said, is not just something you do because you need to do, but it should be in response to the needs of the public.
So then I hear you, Abraham, saying that what needs to happen is that then the leaders of each county really then need to have an intimate view or an intimate relation with what is actually going on in their counties. And that is what they would then bring forward, which would then now be the information that would fuel the decision to finance in a certain way, which then would need to be brought forward.
Sure. I mean, you're right. One of the discussions so after the Constitution was passed, one of the steps that was supposed to happen is something we call function analysis. What does it mean? It meant that we were moving from a central government. I think it's important I clarify that. We were moving from a central government that was trying to provide these services. And we said that certain functions are now going to be provided at the county level. What are these functions? Health, agriculture, public works, control of air pollution, licensing of dogs, the funny one that people keep quoting here and there, and other functions. There are 14 of them.
Yeah.
And therefore, and some of them were going to be concurrent functions. In other words, some parts are going to be done by the national government, some parts were going to be done by the county government. And at that point, we had an opportunity to say, for the functions that we have given to county government, what is the proportional cost of providing those services? So right now, nobody can argue with certainty whether the money going to counties is enough or not enough, because it's against what? Now, that process was led by the Transition Authority, by Kenobia Wamwangi, and to the best of my knowledge is that it was frustrated to its core.
By political interest? What frustrated
political interest, and especially the interest to retain a lot of resources at the national government, because finance are following functions. So whatever you transfer, then the finances must follow. And of course, money is power. And that's how I read it. So because we didn't do that, all the amounts we have been allocating from the 190 billion that was allocated in 2013-2014 and now up to 316 billion has basically just been growing incrementally without any specific growth factor or without any specific goal, because the question to ask in development is, what do we want to achieve? What do we want, and why are we distributing functions? We're not just distributing functions to create positions of power and positions of politics. We are distributing functions to enhance the efficiency with which we provide public services. For instance, right now we are faced with, with a pandemic. Why are we unprepared when we have a health function that is very close, to the people providing that service, as it were? The second reason why we were devolving is bringing governance closer to the people. And you cannot argue 8 years down the road that a county does not know what are the needs of its people.
Yeah, clearly.
And here I must pull in the Council of Governors, because I'm a bit disappointed with them, because they have had a chance over the last couple of years to come up with the numbers and say, this is what actually it costs to deliver the functions that have been devolved to us. You don't hear that conversation. You only hear conversation about money is not enough, money is enough. So for me, that's a fundamental pain about how we move forward in this discussion.
So it seems as if the arguments that are going back and forth then is arguments, for the sake of arguing, not necessarily because it's backed by any kind of information. Because if I were to come and I would look at my county, for example, and I know that the issues that we have are more health related, or that because maybe I have a larger population of younger children, so that I know that I need to invest more in education. So if I just come out and spew that the money is not enough without backing it up with certain things that I've been able to see in terms of trends, would you say that these arguments then are, to an effect, useless?
Yeah, because you see, nobody has come out and said the reason why I am debating and I am for or against this formula is because I am not convinced health services should be getting 17% weight. Or because I am not convinced that, for example, let's take an example of the minimum share.
If you, just coming off what you have said before, so if you as a leader are aware of your regional needs, you've done the study, let's just assume that the homework has been done. Putting that against what we see now, is all this talk and hullabaloo then useless? I
think, as I said earlier, first of all, none of us can substantiate whether the 316 billion that is going to be distributed using, because I think it's important for us to remember that first of all, we have what we call division of revenue, which is how the money is divided between the national government and the county government as a total. And then the formula is what distributes across the county share that distributes across the 47 counties. And this is where the need, the cost of delivering services will vary between different counties, and therefore the need to come up with a formula that basically can be able to make that distribution, so that then you don't just say, so we have 316 billion, divide by 47 and distribute equally across the board, because then you advance inequalities in that sense. So what you're saying is that once the money is already with you, then you have by knowing the needs of your community, then you have a better sense of where to invest. But it also should help with the reverse argument. The reverse argument being that if you, over time, you have been keeping records of how many people are visiting your health facilities, how many farmers are requesting for extension service workers, how many people you have water connected to, then you are able to come up with the numbers and say, look here, the amount of money we are receiving year on year is actually not sufficient to provide the kind of services we need to provide. And that's what I was saying. None has been lacking, and therefore, whether the money is enough or not becomes a different conversation. But the point I was making before we went on break is that this formula, and there is no perfect formula across the world. All the countries where they have come up with formulas, they have had to decide what is important, what do we want to encourage, what is it we are trying to advance, and the Kenyan Constitution provision, the main thing we are trying to provide for is that, one, for services that are already being provided, they should not be disrupted, and that's the principle we call holding harmless. And that's why then we make a provision, for instance, for the minimum share that ensures that there is a certain basic minimum that cannot be disrupted. Now, in the current conversation, there is a provision which has been lying in Parliament for the longest time, I know, of a mechanism to ensure that anytime you come up with a new formula, there are certain counties whose previous allocation is likely to go down, and therefore you come up with a mechanism in which you cushion them over the period, including with this proposal. There is a mechanism that the CRA did propose. I have not heard it being debated. But how much money exactly are we talking about that is being lost? So in 2012, 2013, when we costed how much it was to provide the services based on how much the central government was spending on the functions that we have distributed, it came to about 170 billion. And in 2013-2014, the allocation to counties, therefore, was 190 billion. Now, the counties that are likely to be losing some money, are going to get a lower allocation with this formula if it is passed. They were accounting for about 27%. They are about 17 counties, 27% of the 170. As soon as we started devolution, their share moved up to 37%. Now, over the years, it has remained 36%, sorry, and then moved on to 37% in 2015-2016. And currently, when you work out the difference between last year being 2019-2020, and 2020-2021, the difference is only 3% because the amount has declined from 37% to 34%. Now, it's this 3% that then we should be having a debate in Senate about how do we cushion those counties. So it stops being business of somebody's losing, somebody's gaining, and all the politics that basically are more heat than light kind of conversation. But secondly,
what would the proposal be then in terms of cushioning? And what? First of all, let's justify this cushioning. What's the need for cushioning that 3%?
So the reason why you cushion is because the way we do our budgeting is that our budgeting is first of all incremental, and secondly is supposed to provide some sense of stability and continuity. So there's a possibility that a county had already made certain commitment in phases, and that's this me being very optimistic. And therefore, there is no need to disrupt them on certain commitments they had made, because our budgeting is normally on a medium-term framework, which is 3 years forward.
And how long does the formula last?
So the formula lasts for 5 years. The previous one lasted for 3 years.
Yep.
This one is supposed to last for 5 years.
Then ideally, shouldn't a county be budgeting knowing that we are coming to the end of the formula that has given us a cumulative 37%? And it's likely that we could go to 43 or 35.
But the assumption, so that is what you and I would expect of a leader. But the assumption is that the monies will keep going up.
I see.
But will never decline.
Yeah.
And the reason for the decline is what I was really heated about. That the decline is not necessarily saying we are taking your money and we are not providing for anything in return. As I've said, there was already a proposal on how we can cushion. It may not come to the exact 3% difference. It was coming to about 2% or thereabout, but at least there is a method.
Yeah.
And secondly, development decisions are about trade-offs. Whichever way you go, there must be a trade-off. And the trade-off here is saying we are trading off proxies for direct measure. So that then, you know very well that 17%, of course, somebody would even argue, counties have been spending between 23 and 25% on average on health services. So somebody would have argued, why not even provide 22%?
Yeah.
Agriculture services, other county services, initially they had been called... which are, other county services which basically are not urban, are not agriculture, are not health. Those are the ones that are being measured by population, by saying the fact that you have this size of a population, therefore you are likely to be spending so much. Okay. Nobody is contesting and saying, I have a problem with the allocation we are giving to roads. I have a problem with the allocation we are giving to poverty level. That's the kind of debate I would expect. Because as I've said, our formula is about trade-offs.
I think what we're hearing is people saying that they have a problem with this allocation for other services because that translates to population.
Yes, and I see there's a reason why it is arrived at in that sense. One is that first, you try to provide for a direct measures of need. Are there other things we could have included in this formula? Yes. But there is a limit to how many small 1%, 2%, 3% you can do for every specific. There are 14 functions for crying out loud, and there's only so much you can provide for each of those 14 functions in a formula. Because the assumption is that this gives you an aggregate of the amount you receive. As to where you actually put it, that is the debate between the governor and the county assembly. At the county level. So I think we need to divorce that conversation first. And then come back to the facts that, as I see it, I think we are making progress. This is an improvement from the previous formula. Okay. The debate, as I have said, has to be about needs that we are trying to provide services for. The needs that we are trying to meet in community, and what we are trying to encourage, and largely here is to trying to encourage directly providing for direct measures of need and fiscal prudence. So you see there is a whole effort. There is about 4%, 2% on how many counties are making effort to collect. And by the way, this is not collecting based just on capacity, but even within your capacity, what effort are you putting to be able to collect? And fiscal prudence. How well are you spending your money?
So do you think it's fair? Okay, well, I don't know if that's the right word to use, but then do you think it's fair then to go for the one man, one shilling, proposal, which is what this new formula essentially is based on? So we are saying that you have high levels of population in terms of a population, then that's the kind that will be allocated to you so that essentially you can take care of every being in your region. Development index aside from the previous indicators that you alluded to, Abraham, when you talked about the fact that then have formulas been development driven, like that we can discuss later. But then with what you've said, is it fair then that a formula which you said is not so bad right now, then you have more people, you have a greater allocation in order to enable you then take care of the people?
I think there's a danger in going for population only. argument. Because development is not just about population. Let me give you an example. So you have a county like Elgeyo Marakwet and Garissa.
Yep.
Now, Garissa is a fairly flat, and this is purely for comparison. So Garissa is a wide county, but it's flat.
Yeah.
Elgeyo Marakwet, you basically have three topologies within the same county. By the time you move from Iten down to Kerio Valley, the cost of doing a road in Elgeyo Marakwet or doing water projects in Elgeyo Marakwet will be very different from doing a county that is flat.
Yeah.
Because of topology. And therefore, that's why we try to balance population. For instance, population here has about 18%, yes, 18%. Even in the previous formula, population had 45%.
Okay.
Sorry, poverty level. Poverty level had a
higher percentage, yes.
Had a higher percentage. So, it's really trying to move to look at the different parameters that drive development or lack of it, and trying to find what works best for our country, because that's where the debate should be, in my opinion.
So why is it taking this political twist? Because now we have seen an entire political twist in the framing of the discussion. For instance, those that are really loud and championing against this formula have taken the framing of saying this is President Uhuru Kenyatta trying to advantage his backyard, the Mount Kenya. And we've seen this from various people who have even written, some of them like former Senator of Mandera, Bill Okero, saying this is Mount Kenya receiving a huge chunk of the money. That's one framing. Then there's a framing on the winners and losers. That there are some people who are going to lose money, 1.9 billion shillings, and there are those who are going to be gaining money.
I think the fact is that this country has very many development challenges in different paths. I'm just looking at, and I just needed to correct so that I am on proper on record. The population in the last weight carried 45%.
Yeah, okay.
It's been now reduced to 18%.
18%.
Yeah, poverty is the one that was at 18%.
Now goes to 14.
Now goes to 14%.
Right.
So there are two developmental things that are happening right now. First of all, I think it is wrong to see the formula purely from a money perspective. Because the formula tries, and as I have said, it's purely a redistributive mechanism. And this mechanism, in that very House of Senate, there are members of Senate who are supposed to look at both the interest of their counties, of course, but also at the national picture of what we are trying to achieve. Almost every county now is urbanized, at least in the headquarters. And therefore, there is a need, because what happened is that, and this is the reality, is that when we moved to devolution, counties that had a larger population and were more urban really have suffered a lot, because then the amount of money that was going to them, especially for the equal share, was really not enough. Then you have other counties that had fewer administrative costs, receiving more money than they can even absorb. So what the formula is trying to do is basically balance out. Let me come to the political argument. Politics is about what benefits the people in my backyard.
Yeah.
The question is, have those people actually been benefiting? Or are they just a stooge for argument purposes and for pushing purposes? Because if you go to all these counties across the board, from Kiambu to Mandera to Turkana, have the governors and their county assembly actually applied the resources they have received, 1.8 trillion over the last 7 years. I was just looking at those numbers now. A total of 1.8 trillion over those. Have that money been spent? Of course, the same question can be argued even for the national government. That has received about 4 times that same amount over the same period. Where are we placing? Because this could be as well that we are actually fighting a very different battle. We are just pushing money for money's sake, not because we are going to make any advancement in development for the people we are using and quoting. And we saw this a lot even with the Constituency Development Fund. where the argument was, let's make sure this money is within the hands of the representatives of the people.
Yeah.
Therefore, it will advance development. Now you have cow sheds everywhere and donkey sheds that were built in the name of dispensary.
Yep.
Mr. Rugo, when you hear the senators speaking, in your opinion, who do you think they are addressing?
I think they are picking all this with the national government representatives, the president in particular.
But they're also speaking to their electorate, because the complicated arguments or the detailed arguments such as the one you're putting forward would water down their positions. But if you say we are losing, no, better still, someone is making us lose 1.9 billion.
Mount Kenya is taking our money.
Yes, exactly. Mount Kenya is taking our money, and they've been taking our money, and we have this situation where our counties have been disadvantaged from the time of etc. etc. This is not an argument that is meant for someone who wants to look at the details. This is meant for someone who will take the view that they are being picked on and they are being marginalized. Wouldn't you say so?
That's what pains me, because my let me say my working assumption has always been that leaders, wherever, I mean, even when they have very, very selfish interests, always look at what is in the greater good of the people. Yes, I agree with you. I mean, when you say that money is being taken away from us, Mount Kenya, against us marginalization. But I think, honestly, in this day and age, the marginalization conversation is not where we started.
Sir, I would like you to pause and think about it. It resonates very, very well when political leaders talk about it all the time. Believe me, because it pushes away all the blame or all their failures to somebody else.
Precisely. Yet the responsibility, as I have clearly stated, is within the counties themselves. Of course, I have said we can have a greater conversation even with the national government as to where they have put the billions they have also been spending. But the truth of the matter is that in a devolved system of government, the responsibility has been devolved. And this is basically people, of course, 2022 is coming, elections are coming, there are those who are going home. They must show that the reason why they did not advance their counties is because somebody else was responsible for it. And there are those who are looking forward to come and be governors, so they are also thinking, I need to come and manage something slightly big. And of course, I mean, you cannot divorce even just the misuse and abuse of public office and the resources therein. So it's a mix of things.
The opponents of this also get support from people like the economist Dr. David Ndei, who has released a statement arguing against this formula. For instance, he says the politics of one man, one shilling is a complete reversal of the principle that, we are going to equitably distribute our resources. It's an attempt to return the country to the trickle-down paradigm of the sessional paper number 10 of 1965, which was saying the development money should be invested where it will yield the largest increase in net output. And he says, look, if we look at this, and he gives some examples, he says, at 16,000 square kilometers, the amount of land classified as of high agricultural potential in Marsabit is 1/3 bigger than the 5 counties of the old central province combined. This potential is underexploited, while that of central is more or less exhausted. Where then should more agricultural development money go? Some of the questions that he's posing.
Yes, and for me, and it's interesting to read from Lee, because I sat with him in a meeting where we discussed this formula at length. And anyway, everybody has a right to their opinion. My argument is that if we are going to advance development in this country, the closer we can go to direct measures of need, the better for us as a country.
Let's hear one question here from Esther, who's calling in from Mombasa. She'd like to ask you a question. Esther, good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
We're
well, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question to the guy who is speaking.
Dr. Abraham.
Yes, Dr. Daktari. So I remember the president some time back talking and encouraging people to actually on the devolved government issues, and he was talking about the agenda, his top 4 agendas. There was agriculture and all those. So when I hear there's a change, because to me as a Mwananchi, I'm seeing that is a change and a shift. We were actually psyched up for the government to county government to pick up those initiatives at the county level. So today, when we hear there's a kind of a change, because it's not a continuation of what we were told to do. Guys were told to go back and more or less get their counties to be independent to themselves. And we were looking at natural resources. We were looking at we were not actually comparing counties. We were seeing where will we gain more by doing what is supposed to be done. Getting the natural. I'm talking about Turkana. I'm talking about the Tana River where there was some irrigation.
What's the question then to
my question is, why is it coming up now that it has to be allocations and swifting and coming up with cut down budgets for other people, one person, 1 shilling, I don't know what. Why are we not following what was already set up by the president himself and the national government? Why is it actually coming down now to cut on what the counties were already mandated to do and the people are already on it? Yeah.
All right. Dr. Rugo, you can answer that.
Thanks. I think we need to differentiate, of course. The president's agenda is also largely a national government agenda, and to some extent, of course, a national agenda, because when you think about things like universal health coverage, health is a function of some aspects of it are national government, but the bigger part of it is county government. Mm-hmm. I want to hesitate from saying that this is a reversal, because I don't think we are reversing. The place of public policy and debate therein is to discuss at every point. And the Constitution is the one that provided for this, that for the first 2 formulas, we have 3 years, the third formula, because unless you go for a formula, there is no other way, unless you go to now, there is no better way in which you
casting
lots.
Yes, that you can be able to distribute money in a way that is objective.
Yep.
And the tenet of a formula, by and large, is that it should create certainty and stability in terms of how much is being allocated. It should be transparent of what it's trying to achieve towards that end. And at the same time, a lot of the decisions, once it has achieved those 2 purposes, as to whether the money is spent efficiently, is really a responsibility of the respective of the respective government. So, Esther, I'm not sure we are actually reversing. What we are right now engaged in is a debate of what is the best way to distribute this kitty, which, of course, as I have said, I still have concerns as to whether it is enough or not enough, but that's a discussion for another day. How do we distribute this in a way that, first of all, is transparent, in a way that advances the kind of development and where we are as a country right now, but also in a way that does not create disruption? And that's why I said there is a place for discussing and putting in place a holding harmless kind of mechanism, because whichever formula, even if you go with the second formula, for instance,
there'll still be disparities and disquietance from some quarters.
And the reason why there will be disparities is because the last 2 formulas used the 2009 census data.
Yeah.
We since have done the census of 2019, and we have that data. If you plug in that data alone, because 45% of it was based on population, counties whose population has gone down, again, I am not sure how populations go down, and counties whose population has gone up, as will be expected, will definitely, and I've seen numbers, there will be a change in the numbers.
Dr. Rugo, this is a conversation that, is very deep, very heated, doesn't have an end to it, but it's an important conversation, like we've all said. It's an important conversation to keep having. And what's happening in the Senate now, I mean, they ought to rise to that level where they become honest with themselves, like you've said.
Yeah.
We thank you very much for speaking to us this morning, Dr. Abraham Rugo. He is the country manager for International Budget Partnership, IBP Kenya, speaking to us about this entire revenue allocation formula and the standoff in the Senate. Let's see what comes out of the Senate out of this. This is a Situation Room, is Kenya's biggest conversation, broadcasting on KTN Home up to now. And then we want to say thank you very much for the audience on KTN Home. We'll see